Welcome to Champagne Problems. We're your hosts, Robbie Shaw and Charlotte Cameron. Thank you for joining us on this journey as we explore our mental health, well-being, performance, and longevity, and how our relationships with alcohol can influence each. No shame, no labeling, no judgment, just curiosity. Welcome back, Shining Lights. Today we're speaking with Kelsey Chittick. Kelsey is a writer, a comedian, and an inspirational speaker. Kelsey has lived through the unimaginable, losing the love of her life and father to her two children to a sudden heart attack while playing with their kids. Nate Hobgood Chittick was a Super Bowl champion, a 6-year NFL player, and a larger-than-life husband and father loved by many. Today we will sit with Kelsey and talk about her loss, her grief, her healing, her tremendous growth, and her newfound love for life. Let's go to Kelsey. Kelsey Chittick, welcome to Champagne Problems.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Grant Miles for the connection.
Oh, that's right. He would appreciate that.
Yeah. Turns out we've known each other for some time now. Same year at UNC, both athletes, both lived in New York City at the same time, ton of mutual friends. And then there's something about us dating former boyfriend and girlfriends.
Right. We're like, did we sleep together or did we?
I don't know. It's still a little hazy. Anyway, so thank you for coming on. We're very excited to talk to you. We know a lot of your story, and we've seen a lot of what you do as far as, you know, your talks, your podcast, your book. We've obviously dug into all that stuff, and we're very excited to hear your journey. But we're going to start with a little rapid fire to get to know you.
Okay.
Get you thinking a little bit. What was your first live music concert and where?
MC Hammer, Orlando, Florida.
God almighty.
Isn't it funny how that, like,
so
the answer always comes to people so quickly?
Yeah.
Turn in there.
I've found that question to be pretty common among social, situations. A lot of people ask me that question.
I like it.
MC
I can't remember anything after that. That was it.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. Hammer. So good. Go ahead.
Who is the funniest person you know and why?
Funniest person I know. I can't think of all of my friends, like I think my best girlfriends, just like the ones from high school.
Yeah.
They're the people that make me laugh the hardest. Just
Yeah.
our text string and what we say to each other that's just so offensive and wrong. And I think that those are the people I laugh the hardest with now, just like my friends that have known me forever.
Yeah.
Because you can say anything and just it's fine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. And a lot of times you don't even have to say anything. It can be a facial expression and you know what's going on in that brain.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
The
love
best.
it.
I am so grateful for like old friends from when you were a kid.
Yeah. Yep. They're the best. What word do you hate the most? And it can't be moist.
I hate moist.
I know you do. Everybody hates that word.
I hate moist. What word do I hate? Moist is the grossest word. My kids say it all the
Such a
time.
bad word.
It
They're
doesn't
like,
bother me so much.
It's just nasty. Nasty. The nasty person says moist. What word do I hate? I don't hate a word, but I used to hate for a long time. It is what it is.
Mm.
And I'd be
Mhm.
like, you know what? Just jump off a cliff. Like
Yeah.
I can't handle people that go that way. We can talk about this later, but I do have a new perspective on that. But for a long time, I was like, you're a loser if you say something like that.
Right.
Like how can you just bypass life like that? But
Yeah.
I have
just
a new
is.
perspective. It is what it is. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
God.
You're not being philosophical when you say that.
No.
All right. What movie have you seen the most times?
Dirty Dancing.
Such a good one.
Filmed in North Carolina.
I want that moment. I want that moment in that cabin. I want it to be raining outside. I want there to be music. I need to be held like
Fair.
that.
Fair.
I promise you I will recreate that at some point. I'll be 70, but I need that. I need him to spin me and drop me.
I will
And I
be
need all
held.
the things. Mhm.
All right, this one's a little deep. If you could know the answer to any question, what would you ask?
I feel like I've asked it and I think I know it now. Like, is everything going to be okay?
Mm.
for all of us. Like, is it okay? Is everything okay eventually at some point in the ether, in the universe? Like, and I think that's a question I ask God a lot. Like, is everything going to be like, are you sure? Because this seems a little
Yeah,
crazy.
it doesn't feel like it.
Mm-mm. Yeah, so is everything going to be okay? And I think if you check in most of the times, it's like, yeah, I don't know when or how, but like, yeah,
Isn't it like Winnie the Pooh or something? He says something like, in the end, it'll all be okay. If it's not
yeah.
okay, it's not the end.
In the end, it all works
Ooh.
out, and if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end.
There it is. Okay.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
I like
We
that.
say that a lot around here.
Hmm.
Yeah, just hang on, hang on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Love it. All right. Now we know you, Kelsey. The rest is just fluff.
exactly. Rest is just big boobs and good looks here.
Yeah, that's right. Just a fluff piece. Today's episode is sponsored by Athletic Brewing Company, America's leading non-alcoholic craft brewer. Have you been thinking about cutting back on alcohol but still aren't sure if near beers are for you? Check out Athletic Brewing, the most decorated non-alcoholic brewer in the world. Athletic produces a wide selection of great tasting brews, including IPAs, Goldens, Darks, Lights, Sours, and more. Their non-alcoholic beers have won over 70 awards and are fit for all time, so you can drink them anytime and anywhere. Now you can enjoy great tasting craft brews all night long and still be ready for whatever life throws at you tomorrow. Right now, new Athletic customers can receive 20% off their first order when they visit athleticbrewing.com and use the code CP20 at checkout by August 31st, 2023. What were you like before you met Nate? Who was Kelsey Durkin up until her 20s?
I know her well. I don't miss her, but I know her well. She was just, she was a go-getter. She just needed to be the best at everything. She needed to achieve everything. She was busy. I loved when I was good at something. I only did things I was good at. She was really uptight and afraid of not making something of her life. I swam back and forth all day since I was 6. Everyone's like, did you have anxiety? I'm like, I don't know, but I did swim 6 hours a day. So
So maybe.
Likely
There's
not.
that.
maybe that's a tool. I don't know. I was just intense. I was intense. I was really going to make sure that my life looked a certain way and that I was going to be good at things. And I was opinionated. I'm still opinionated, but I had no room for people that weren't doing things the way I thought were supposed to be done. I had all the answers. I was just the best. And I just thought I was just better because I was uptight and rigid. And my brother, we've talked about, had a little drinking and drug problem, was like, do you ever have fun? And I was like, fun is for losers.
Fun's
That's
for
not gonna-
slackers.
I would not want to be having fun.
Oh my
Be
God,
achieving.
Kelsey.
So, yeah. And I think when I met Nate, I was still that way, just really just tick, tick. Nate used to say being married to me was like tick, 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 just like on him, just bothering, just so regimented, and so afraid of everything, basically, I think.
Wow. No offense, you and I I now see why we weren't very close in college.
Oh, your whole crew did not resonate with
Not
my
operating
uprightness.
there. No. What
We're-
you're saying resonates with me a lot. I think I was a lot like that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I met
Where
my-
does
No
that
one-
come? Where's that come from?
It's funny because my brother and I are totally different and we were raised in the same home. I think it's really interesting when you look at your kids or your family, everyone takes a spot and everyone has to have their own spot. So it's not as much that our families made us that way. It's that we found a spot that worked for us and then we just settled into it.
Yeah.
And that became who you were in the family. My brother followed Fish and Grateful Dead and smoked weed. And I swam and got good grades and was uptight. And once that narrative starts to play in a family or inside of you, it stays. And
Yeah.
that's who you think you are. And as a kid, you don't even know there's an option to pivot.
Yeah.
You
Well,
just,
because they accept you that way as well.
yeah. And
Right.
you either get it good attention or bad attention from whichever one. My brother got a lot of bad attention, but that's how he just needed space and I just needed rigidity. And so we created lives that gave us peace for whatever we were going through. And it wasn't trauma, it was just life. Like everyone, no matter if you have an abusive home or a regular home, you're still in life, and life is hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard to navigate and figure out who you are and what you're supposed to be doing. So, um, yeah.
That sounds like IFS work. Have you done
Yeah,
any?
oh, yeah. Actually, internal family
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't gotten into that a ton. My mom really got into it because in our family, when we get into like a book or a new way of looking, we really go for it and we want the whole world to change it. And she got into it. So I was like, I'm not doing it. But I've heard such great stuff
It's
about that entire like therapy and way of looking at how you grew up.
yeah, it's great. All right. So you've probably told this many times, or I know you've told this many times because I've actually heard you tell it a number of times. But tell us a little bit about the first meetings with Nate, and then the following dates and just the
Yeah.
beginning. The beginning.
So I was a swimmer at Carolina, got there in 1995, and first 2 years kind of dated people on the swim team. And then there was like a big year where Chris Keldorf was the quarterback and everybody was talking about him. And we were just like nerdy. He was so hot. Listen, he lives down the street from me now. I'm like, get back there. We all need you to get back there. And the swimmers, we kind of hung out with each other, but one of my girlfriends started dating this just really big offensive lineman, Ryan Carfley, who's also a good friend of mine. And through that, we ended up kind of hanging out with football players. And at some point, Chris started dating my roommate, Liz, who we just talked about. And so they dated for a little bit. And so we were kind of like, we felt like celebrities because at that time, Carolina was doing really well. And I think we beat FSU that year. And at some point, we were hanging with them. So I met Nate originally at Players. No, not Players. I'm sorry. What's the one at the end of the street? Four Corners. And I met him one night when he came in to the bar with like a bunch of just enormous men. And we were like jacked up swimmers. Our shoulders were up. We were in like khaki pants and, tank tops, just not a stitch of makeup. Didn't even, no pictures back then.
Yeah.
I just was big and masculine. And I remember Nate came up to us and we were all sitting at the bar and he kind of like moved his way in to sit next to us and grab a drink. And he started like talking to us and saying all these inappropriate things, which Nate said till the day he was gone. And at some point that evening, he left a napkin in front of my stool. And when I opened it, it said, if you want the best, say goodbye to the rest, go home with me and I'll make you happy.
That's
what
bold.
A move.
And I remember, the great part of that story is like 3 years later, I was at a wedding with a bunch of girls and this one girl we were married by then. And this woman was like, oh my God, I totally remember Nate in college. He gave me this napkin one time.
Oh,
And
no.
it said, if you want the best, whatever, the whole thing, if you want the best, whatever. And I was like, that fucking guy. So
how many of those napkins are floating around?
What a loser. I'm sure there's like 80 of them. He was shameless. He'd take anything.
That's so good.
So I met him, and then about 4 months later, we ended up having a party at our house, and a bunch of the football guys came. And I remember we were watching X-Files and just dancing, and everybody was hammered. And at some point, I was dating some guy from the Naval Academy, and I remember I was on the phone with him, and Nate came over, and he was like sweating, and he had like a Coors Light box on his head, and he just took the phone, and he was like, "She's with me now." And
oh my God.
And honest to God, I was like, I was 19, and I knew like, oh, he had come into my room and read the Serenity Prayer. My parents had gotten divorced. We had addiction issues in our family, and so I'd done Al-Anon for quite a bit. And he was like, "Oh, I live my life by that shit," and I was like, "You beefcake, like you spiritual, enlightened beefcake, talk dirty to me."
By that
and so
shit.
that was it. That was it. I was with him, never with anybody else again, from 19 till 40.
Wow.
Yeah. I know it still makes me cry. Like when I think about it, like it's so funny, but I'm like, oh God, we had a good life.
Yeah.
We had a good life.
Well, from that moment, I guess, there was, it sounds like many years where you were influencing each other, growing together. What was that like? I mean, how did you change as a person because of being in a relationship with him, and vice versa? How did he change over that time?
I mean, I honestly think we were meant to be for like thousands of reasons. We were really on a spiritual path at very young ages. His father was a minister at Harvard, a campus minister that ran a homeless shelter with a bunch of students. My mother-in-law was a professor at Holy Cross, a religious feminist ethics um, professor there. My family was really into Dispensa and Esther Perel and just like the power of the mind. I can't even think of Dwayne Dyer. Like there was a lot of these similar conversations going on. Theirs was more service based. How do we help the world? My family was more like, how do we help internally? Like, how do we become the best person? So we spent a lot of time very early on just wanting to live, like, talk about living a great life. What does it mean to become the best version of yourself? What does it mean to serve others, to find your purpose? And that we were talking about that when we were 21, 22, 23. He ended up playing in the NFL, which was just mind blowing to everyone because he didn't play that much at Carolina. And actually, Mac Brown told him to quit. And, you're not good enough to even play your senior year. And then he ended up getting drafted and played for 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So we always we just enjoyed each other. Like we had fun. We had great friends. He's from Allentown, just wretched, wonderful people, just
Yeah.
generous, every one of them. And I love them with all of my heart. Everyone's sober now. After he died too, like everyone got sober, like the whole town's sober now and it needed it. But so we knew we wanted kids. I remember I was 23 when we got engaged, which if my daughter got engaged at 23, I'd be
Oh
like,
my God.
"Are you insane?" And I think my family thought that, and I think he thought that too, but I just knew that's what we needed to do. We were better together. But what I will say in our marriage, what happened is I stayed really uptight and he stayed really spiritual and connected. And what I think he needed me because I grounded him and I needed him because he was so fun and loving. And so we dropped into those roles pretty early. So I was uptight and neurotic and he was the fun guy that everybody loved and that just loved life. He took up all the loving of life and I took up all the day-to-day like knickknacks and stress. So, and we went on, we had 2 kids and a boy and a girl, just exactly like I planned, because that's how I do it. I'd say,
Yeah.
ordered that. But we were young and thank God. And so we just kind of lived a great life. We moved out to California. Chris Keldorf, who we talked about, that was a quarterback, actually grew up in Manhattan Beach. And he said, come out here to this like little town. You guys can go back to North Carolina in a year. And that was 20 years ago for us. And so we just created kind of a new life, but in a town that was very similar to what he and I grew up in, like a small town. I grew up in Winter Park, Florida. He grew up in Allentown, which with a small group of people, and we loved it. And we had a good life. And underneath it all, I was pretty stressed and miserable if I look back in terms of just anxiety.
Mm. So y'all lived in Manhattan Beach.
Well, now we say that, but because
Okay.
no one really knows where El Segundo is. We live in El Segundo, which is
Oh
basically
yeah.
like El Segundo is like it's living in like Kansas City in the middle of LA. Like everyone still wears khakis. Like Old Navy is fine. And then you go to Manhattan
Right.
Beach, it's like only Range Rovers,
Yeah.
only like it's a half a mile apart, but worlds.
Yeah.
It's growing though, right? At the
Oh,
moment?
it's great. Like I love
Rapidly,
where we
yeah.
live. We've got some environmental issues that I'm not keen on, but that's another podcast for another day.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. It's hard not to do the left my wallet in El Segundo joke.
It happens every time.
I assume it does. I
Every
didn't
time.
want to. I didn't want to do it without making it obvious. It was stupid. I want to be very mindful of this, but I do know that you tell the story,
Mhm.
the tragedy.
Mhm.
Would you be open to telling that?
Oh, it's all I talk about. It's the only thing that matters. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm happy to.
Okay.
So it was 2017, and we were like in a really good place. The kids were 9 and 12. We had kind of gone through some financial issues that all NFL players need to. You need to invest with a bunch of guys that play football because they seem to really have great business minds.
Yeah.
Let's all buy something together. That's smart because you all never took a class in college, but that's fine.
Right.
Let's then take all of our money we've earned and invest it in real estate. Okay.
Yeah.
So we had some tough times going through just like bad decisions that we were learning from. And, he was trying to figure out what to do after he played. So he played 6 years, and then he went back to school and got his master's in social work from Cal State Long Beach. And then he was a social worker which bless it, but that doesn't work out here financially. It's very hard
No.
to live. I was
Yeah.
a pharmaceutical rep, which is just a real classy act, selling heartburn medicine in a short skirt for a while.
Yeah.
Best job ever back then, but not exactly like soul providing in
Right.
terms of just doing, your purpose. So we both were trying to figure out like, what are we doing here? So I ended up starting to work with some guys out of Chapel Hill. Ryan Carfley had started a recruiting company, and so I started working with them in 2012. So I was going back and forth. Nate ended up leaving social work because it wasn't what he thought it would be, and he always had managed his own money from the NFL, and he always had been interested in making money and investment. So he started at Morgan Stanley, ended up doing really well, and by the time it was 2017, he was working with another guy and started his practice and was doing really great as a financial advisor. I was doing a job I loved. I was writing, I was doing stand up, and life was like, we made it. The kids were capable of, staying home by themselves and brushing their teeth and getting food, but they weren't into drugs or sex. It was like that sweet spot.
Yeah. Very, very small,
Couple
sweet window.
couple of years where you go like, we're all good. And I remember we were like, we made it, like we did it, like we're here, we have jobs we love, we've gotten through some hard times, the kids are good, and it was great. We had this awesome spring break that summer before. We kind of did a tour. We were like, we should just go everywhere. So we did a tour of California. And through all this, though, I had just anxiety, like low grade anxiety. I don't think I had it when I was younger, but I can't remember because it was so prominent once I had the kids. I just didn't want anyone to die. I remember thinking, like, I just don't want anyone to die. Like, I love this family. I love these people. Like, how do I keep us all from dying? And that kind of was my
Huh.
lead thought, most of my life, especially as a young mother. I just wanted us to all be okay. And as time went on, the anxiety kept getting worse and worse. And Nate was like, listen, like, we're good. Everything's fine. Like, what are you doing? You're so uptight. You're so neurotic. You're always angry or you're bossing around. Like, do you ever just relax? And I couldn't. I was flying. I felt like I couldn't.
Yeah.
And so at some point, Nate and I read a book, The Code of the Extraordinary Mind, which is just a great book of looking at different beliefs, how we perceive things. And we've read every spiritual book, but that one, for some reason, just kind of resonated with both of us, just looking differently at the whole way you look at the world and life and your thoughts. And through that, I ended up giving the book to Tony Gonzalez, who read it. And we all kind of just had a little book club going. And at some point, they were like, we got in touch with the author, and he had this event called A Fest. So long story short, Nate was like, you need to get some help. Like, you need to calm down. You need to go like figure out what you want to do, because we're all good and you're kind of like crazy. Which, and I think I was. And I just had this feeling. And so 2 years before that, I just was like, I was just off. So I started on this spiritual journey, kind of just reading. And so at 2017, at that point, there was an opportunity to go to this retreat for a weekend, kind of just to listen to Wim Hof and Stephen Cutler and some really great people that were doing great things, talking about stuff. And Nate was like, you should go. And so we had an opportunity for Tony's wife and I, who's one of my best friends, to go for this 3-day trip. And I was like, I would love to go, but I can't leave because something bad will happen if I leave. And he was like, you need to go because you need to come back a new person. Like, you have got to figure out how to live in this world without being so uptight and fear-based. He's like, this isn't living. Like, I was having panic attacks all the time. And he's like, I don't know what's happened, but we need a reset here. So he kind of forced me to go, I ran our house. I ran our life. He was just like a happy, best father, best husband, also living on another planet sometimes. I was like, we're here, we're on here, we're down here.
Yep.
The trash is Wednesday, every Wednesday. How can we forget every Wednesday? It just
Didn't change this week.
We knew it was Wednesday. He just didn't care about the little things. He didn't understand my obsession with the knickknacks of life. He wanted connection. He wanted to have good conversations. You know how they say there's like a balloon and a rock? He was like the biggest balloon, and I was like the boulder of all players. Like, I mean, you couldn't move around me. I'd catch you and I'd stick you under me and I'd hold you down. No fun in our family. So that weekend, Nate was like, you have to go. So long story short, he drove me to the airport. and kissed me and said, like, you're the most amazing woman I've ever met in my life. I hope you go and find out what you're meant to be and how strong you are, and that you are capable for so much more, and that everything's okay. Like, everything's okay. You can relax. We are all good. Go have fun. I'll see you when I get back. Kissed me, went to drop me off at LAX. I met my girlfriend, and we went and had what probably was one of the most transformative 3 days of my life. Something happened when I landed in Jamaica, and I kind of just relaxed. Like, all the anxiety went away. I listened and I was like, oh, I'm gonna change. Like, it kind of all integrated. And I remember telling someone the day before the conference was over, like, I want to do all this, but I hope something bad doesn't have to happen for me to, like, change. Like, I want to be a different version. I want this Kelsey to go. And so the last day, which was a Saturday, I got a phone call. We were about to go on this final excursion, and I saw somebody call, and it was a number I didn't know, so I just ignored it. And then my best friend called, Chris's wife, who's my best friend from childhood, and she's like, listen, don't freak out, don't do the Kelsey, everybody's fine. But Nate was at the trampoline park at Sky Zone with the kids, and he fell. So the ambulance has taken him to UCLA, and we're gonna go get the kids, and your brother-in-law is gonna meet him at the hospital. And honest to God, I was like, he's dead. And everybody was like, he's not dead. And I was like, he's dead. And I
Oh
didn't
God.
talk. I probably didn't talk again, because I was waiting for the call that would then confirm what I knew in every part of my body. Um, and so, yeah, then we ended up getting in a taxi, and they're like, why are you going home? He's just probably dehydrated. I was silent. I was like, get me to the airport. And then on the way there, the doctor at UCLA called and just said, I'm so sorry. We tried
Mm.
everything, but your husband died of a heart attack, and um, we'll see you when you get back. And so I got home at about midnight, and I had lied to the kids, which I can talk about all that stuff around, but I just didn't want them to know without me being there. And so I just
Yeah.
walked into Chris and Michelle's house, and I said, I have to tell you, but your dad's gone. And, I want you to know three things. He wouldn't have never left us if we weren't okay. That just wasn't his style. Um, I said, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, because my whole life I have had your father, and he was pretty much it. But I'm going to figure it out. So you guys go ahead, be 9 and 12, because I'm going to be the mom here, and we're gonna have a great life. And then I think the last thing I said was, most kids don't have a father like you for a day, and you had him
Mm.
for 9 and 12 years, and he gave you every single thing you needed to know. So don't think that you're the victim, just remember you're the lucky ones. And that kind of was our North Star starting 5.5 years ago. Those three things, we were like, we're the lucky ones. We're the lucky ones that we had him. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
It's a story, all right.
It is a story. How did you know?
I've always been intuitive. I've always had gut feelings about whatever I do. I can always kind of check in and almost hear a yes or no. The alarm bells the 2 years before he died, and also, he played football. He had CTE. I didn't know how sick he was. He didn't know. None of us knew. But I must have been picking up on his health on some way. It's hard when you live with someone, and you also don't want to see a lot of it, but he looked older to me. He looked pale. He just the joie de vivre that I had known for 20 years was kind of turned down. He looked really tired, and I was like, this doesn't match. And I was looking at other husbands and dads, and I was like, he used to be the strongest, like, he was everything. And I saw him slowing down, and there was a little bit of sadness that I had never seen. Um, and I didn't know if it was just like midlife, or just, you know, stress, or he'd gotten through some hard things. Um, but I also, like, my whole life with Nate, it was different than like a normal marriage. I was like, we had to be together, but it was this like agreement. I can't explain it. It was just this deep feeling that something was going to change, and I better be ready. Yeah.
So he died of a heart attack,
Hmm.
had stage two-ish, three-ish CTE.
Hmm.
Are those related?
I mean, all of it's probably all of it's tied to football in some ways. I'm not gonna, and we talk about football a lot. And in the beginning, when the book came out, it's again, my big belief is that you can hold two beliefs at the same time. I love football deeply. Those are my people. Those men have showed up for me. They continue to. There's nothing better than watching a game and being with your buddies and cheering for people. It's such a community builder. And it's a terrible sport for kids' brains. And it's a terrible sport for people's brains. Um, and we watch people get hit all the time. And what we don't see is, I think I said on Peter's podcast, we were talking, and Peter's like, why don't they have a like, where are they now? Like they used to on MTV for musicians.
Yeah,
You should
yeah.
see some of these guys that played 3 or 4 years. Where are they now? Like everyone worshiped them, and now they're like a bartender with seat. It's just like we have to do a better job, not of not playing football and not loving it, but just finding different ways, especially for our kids. Like kids don't need to be in helmets. There's just no, we make them wear a helmet when they ride a bike. So if they fall off once, they're safe. Why would we let them like bang heads? So that's a whole nother story. But I love football and I think it's a very dangerous sport. So his heart, basically, the defensive linemen have a very high rate of dying early because, like, big animals die early, like elephants, things like that. And it's just your heart works so much to move that body. People forget that NFL players, especially on the line, are really fast. They're really athletic. So if you're a big man that can sprint a 40 at the rate that they can, it takes a lot on your heart. So a lot of these guys' hearts just get, imagine a heart is like a battery, and if you use it too much, it dies early.
Yeah, it gets
So
old.
it
Yeah.
gets old. And so his heart, his left ventricle was so stretched out just from, and he was the toughest, strongest. Like that guy could do things. You'd be like, whoa, big dude, moves fast, jumps high. And I loved that about him. But his left ventricle just got stretched like a water balloon. So the last time it went to contract, there was no contraction. The CTE, he was a worker on the team. He was never a starter, not at Carolina, not in the NFL. So he took every hit in practice from the time he was seventh grade till he was 26. And so he never sat out. Peyton Manning and Tom Brady sit out a lot. People don't
Yeah.
knock them out often. Nate just took it head on, day after day. So a lot of these linemen just take so many hits to the head in practice. And so he just had almost stage 3, so lesions all over different parts of his brain, which basically are just black spots you see when you look, that are just the brain tissue is no longer, it's just dead there. It has plaque on it. I knew something was off with him, but he was always like, everyone's like, but he was always different. I'm like, that's true. Yeah. But there was a difference. He had like never yelled at me. I don't think in our whole marriage. I mean, we had gotten hot with each other and we'd scream and we were like a normal couple, but he had never been disrespectful. He had never scared me ever. Like he was huge and he was always very aware of his size and how intimidating that would be. So he would be like, he would walk away, but like 3 weeks before he died, something happened with the cable and he was like, what the fuck? Did you not fix the cable? And I remember I looked at him like, you've never spoken to me like that. And he looked at me like, I've never spoken to you like that. And then he was so sad. He was like, I'm sorry. I don't even know what I just did. If you really talk to women who have husbands that have CTE that are still alive, there's a lot of that, like just like anger and then just shame because they don't know what they just did.
Yeah.
So
So how do you go from there? What is that healing process? How does that start? I mean, that's a big question, it feels like.
you mean after he died?
Yeah.
Like I said, I think there's two things. I got real clear that we better decide right now how this is going to look a week, a month, and a year, 5 years from now. Because I thought we're on a different planet now, and if I don't have a roadmap to where I'm headed, you could end up in a ditch quick. I just never lived an adult life without him, and he was kind of the light of our lives. Like he was just joy. Like life was better when Nate was here. But I also knew like who he was and what he would expect of me. And I just remember thinking like, I'm not going to let him down. Like he didn't let me down. Like I'm going to do this. And I was just like, I'm not going to let this be our kid's story. Like I'm not going to have this sad story. Like I will not do this. We've been too lucky. He worked too hard and I've got too great of, I'm too lucky. Like I just have to be real careful to stay alive. Like I just need to stay alive. I knew it would get better if I just could hang on. And it was about 2.5 years, 3 years. The first 3 years, the first 2 years, you might as well just,
Yeah.
you just don't even know.
Shock.
Yeah, and you're in a world you never wanted. You are the people you always used to be like, God, that's awful. Like I love attention, but not that type. I was like, I wanted to be famous for comedy, not the widow. Like, it's just not,
This is not what I was
I was
Yeah.
envisioning.
going for fame, but
Yeah,
this was
yeah,
not the avenue I wanted it.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think, and the kids and I just remember early on being like, we're going to make it. We're going to make it, and we're going to make this a good story. And I'm the best storyteller, so we're gonna write this story the way we want it to go, and we're gonna fake it till we make it. And my family has done a lot of work in AA, and I we kind of went after it that way. We just went one step at a time, one day at a time. And sometimes even right now, like I'm like, holy shit, we did it. Like we're okay. And we've been through other stuff through, we've had some really tough times inside of those 5 years, but we have tools. We have a lot of tools that we use in our family. And I think people think you wing it or you just like pray about it or you just hope and no, you work, you work, you
Yeah.
work, you work to survive. And then it becomes just part of how your family operates. Um, you just have tools. Like people just need tools.
So my mind is going everywhere right now because obviously if you know a little bit of my history and there's some adversity and when you go through some of this stuff you look back and you know that that was one of the worst slash best things that could have happened to me, in a sense, for growth and finding a new way to look at life and live life. And oh God, to do it with kids, there's got to be this balance of doing it for them and doing it with them.
Hmm.
And I would love to hear just kind of, I mean, I understand that the first 2 years were kind of a wash and you're in it and it's ugly and you're figuring it out. But at some point, you have to lead by example, but they got to be all in with you, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think in the beginning I tried to make it better. And then I realized like there was no better. I couldn't make it better. And there's something about a complete release of any responsibility to make it better. And so I didn't ever, in the beginning, I would try to tell the story in a way that would be like empowering, like your father loved you and we were lucky, that whole thing. And that is true. But early on, the kids were like, it's awful.
Yeah.
This is awful. And we need you to be okay with it being awful. Please stop bypassing how awful this is. And for some reason, they gave me permission to be like, this is awful and we're going to make it. Those two things live at the same time. This is the worst fucking nightmare of our lives. I don't know how we're going to do it and we're going to make it. And that kind of was how we lived. Like we didn't try to make it okay. And we really dug into how awful it was. But I stopped trying to make them feel better or make them talk about it or what. There's so many things I learned. And I do think if the parent's okay, the kids are okay. And if the kids aren't okay, but you're okay, that's their path. So I am not codependent with my kids at all. I was responsible for them, but I'm not God. I'm not their keeper. I'm not their, they have to figure out who they want to be. I will give them everything. I will walk this path with them, but they too chose this experience on some spiritual level. Whatever their lessons are this is their experience. So I don't anymore. I hurt for them. I hurt for me. I hurt that we don't have a dad, that they, that like everything's a daddy daughter dance and Jack can't go to, his dad will never see him play basketball at Loyola, which would have been a dream, or take him to college. And those are true. It hurts. It's sad. And we're okay. And we have
Yeah.
beautiful people that step in. So we toggle back and forth quite often. And we have, I think, from the beginning, crawling around the house just in utter pain to being like, oh my gosh, we're living, we're happy. And the joy you have when you come out of something like this and you feel happy again, it's like drugs.
Oh yeah.
Like if your bandwidth before a tragedy or a hard time is like 20 is the lowest you are and 60 is the happiest you are. Now I swing between 0 and 150. When I'm having fun, it's like I mean, it's like ecstasy. You're just like, oh my God, like look at this. And when it's low, it's like, I'm gonna have to take myself out. Like this is the end. But I appreciate that.
I'm out.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us spend our time trying to just stay in the middle.
Yeah.
Don't be too sad. Don't be too happy. Just hang on. We don't hang on. We swing from the trees now. Just and the more you swing, the more you're used to it. And you're like, oh, I'm not afraid of the one anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid. I'm like, oh, here we go. It's gonna be dark for a bit up in here. And
Yeah.
we know how to navigate it because we have tools. So I think that's what happened. The kids got older, which is easier. And Nate lives well and alive in our home. So it's not a secret. I mean, I talk about it too much for them, but you talk too much for any teenager. So it doesn't matter.
Right.
When I look at them, they're annoyed. But I'm starting to see the things that we've worked on and we've done as a family starting to pay off in them as they become adults. And I'm like, that's cool. Like they're really cool people. They're cooler than I ever imagined. And this will inform their lives in ways I don't know, and we're all going to figure that out. And I feel like Nate's with us. Like a part of that too is like I was like, he's not gone, and they're like, if you say he's a hummingbird one more time, I'm like, he's a hummingbird.
He's right there.
Oh, I'm the worst. They're like, that's not him. I'm like, whatever. You don't have to believe. I'm like, hi Nate.
Hi Nate.
Oh, they're always like, I'm like everything. They're like everything's a sign. I'm like, yeah, it is because you get to choose what the damn sign is. I just happen to put him everywhere because for me, I can't do life without him. So I bring him to me, right?
Yeah.
That's just a choice. I'm like, they're like, well, how do you know? I'm like, who cares? That feels good to me is to know that he is that plant and that hummingbird and that sign and that cloud. And that's just what I do. And they can choose what they do. But yeah, we've all kind of found our rhythm, and it was dark for a really long time. Sometimes I forget when I tell the story now, I'm like, it was so bad for a long time. Like dark. But yeah, it's amazing though. Your brain kind of time is really relative with death. You don't know if it was a lifetime, an hour. Yeah.
Do you remember being cognizant during that transition? I guess I don't know if this would resonate for you, but like when you're in that moment of survival, maybe it's a couple of years, and then you start to transition out of that survival mode. I think there's like this process of awareness where you start to think like, oh my God, I'm out of it enough to be cognizant that I have empathy for myself. Like that was a lot. And then going into like coming fully out of, I mean, were you cognizant of that process as it was taking place?
Yes. I had, so, and I don't talk about this much and I won't even go into it, but I had some medical stuff that came about 2 years after he died, which I'm pretty certain was from stress. Just like my body broke down. Like I was just like, this isn't like, I couldn't process the pain. I couldn't figure out how I was going to survive this. And then COVID hit and it just felt like, okay, this is a joke. Like this is just too much. I'm like alone with two grieving kids. I'm a widow. I'm 30, whatever I was, 41, 42. I don't know how to live without him. Like, and I got sick and I didn't get sick. I don't want to say that. I got a diagnosis I didn't want. I was not sick. But then the process of working through that diagnosis was scary for the children. And just like, you're like, really, God, like, this is too much. Like, I wanted to be like, hey, asshole, like enough is enough. I get it, But, and that experience was really even bigger for me than Nate dying, because I was like, oh my God, we really have no control. Like, just stop trying to figure it out. Stop trying to make it better. Stop trying to make it worse. Just hang on today. And somehow that final experience kind of took my fear away, which has basically been the lead story in my life, is just anxiety and fear. And so that's when I remember it passed. I was literally like, I surrender, God, like enough. I don't need any more signs. I don't need any more lessons. You have beat me over the head with some big ones. And now I promise you, no matter what happens, if I die, if people die, if my kids, like, I'm done. I'm done worrying. I'm here today. I have no idea what will be tomorrow, but today I'm okay. And that's kind of where I've been for the past 2.5 years, which has been just it feels like you're on drugs.
Yeah.
When you're in a present moment and you're in the flow, you're like, shit, I don't need to take anything.
Yeah.
This thing's good, you know? So
Yeah.
that's been for me, that's probably the different, it kind of about 2.5 years, I was so tired of being tired. I was just like, I can't, I was done.
It's such a interesting timeline of events in the sense that the way you described yourself, which I didn't know in asking, I didn't know you were so type A and so psycho.
Not
I didn't
fun.
know that about you,
Least
honestly.
fun person in North Park, Florida. Never did a drug, never did anything, never had
Yeah.
fun. Fun was disgusting.
Well, and look at you now, and look, and not that it. I hate to say that it took that,
Oh, it did.
but it did, and so it's just the fascinating irony or the whatever you call it, the signs from God, the messages, the universe, all the things just saying, "Oh, you think you're in control?"
I had it all
Yeah,
figured out. Yep.
yeah,
I
yeah.
was somebody who just knew that I was better than everybody. Like I just had it figured out. Like, sorry, perfect life, everyone. Hello, like NFL football player, boy and a girl, 2.5 years apart.
Killing it,
I don't know what
killing
to
it.
tell you guys, but
Yeah,
somebody missed the lessons I
yeah.
learned.
Get behind me.
And then God was like, he was like,
Right.
and scene. And I was like, oops.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's and I do think it's a story that we all tell. If you are evolved, if you are someone who is present in this world, you have been through something. I didn't want to go through the something. Nobody does. It's not
Mhm.
fun. I
Yeah,
wouldn't change it for the world. I
yeah.
wouldn't change anything in my life. Not one single thing. I didn't enjoy it, but fun is not the goal. That's the thing I didn't know. Like easy and fun is not what we're here for. It's so short. And Nate really, Nate lived all in, literally all in. And it drove me insane, but I'm so glad because I saw what it looks like to just love life.
Mm.
Like he'd get pulled over with a DUI and be like, "I'm so sorry. I just," and the police officer would be like, "What happened?" He'd be like, "Well, obviously I drank too much and drove."
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. It's on me. Like, take me away. Like,
yeah.
but like he wouldn't have changed that dinner with his friend. He had no regrets. Like he just was in the moment and he was just intense and the way he loved and hugged and made people feel was just he was like he knew he didn't have enough time, and if we all just knew we didn't have enough time, we would live that way. And I think when you live in anxiety and stress, you're in the future, fully in the future. Or and I don't I know a lot of people that worry about the past. Most men do that more, women I don't think look back. We maybe at a social event, some women are like, I wish I hadn't said that, but most of us are just making sure no one's going to die, and it's really hard to be fun and joyful and present when you're just looking for
Yeah.
lane lines. And
Yeah.
that's what moms do. A lot of us do. Um, and a lot of us that have more resources, that we have extra time to have the luxury of worrying about that, as opposed to even a lot of people don't even have the time to do that. Um, so it's a spiritual awakening to the present moment. And we've all heard it. We've all done Buddhist meditations. We've all have Sam Harris's app, but until you need it, you don't, it doesn't work until you're there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And all of us that are on this side of it, look at the people that are not on this side of it and go, listen to me.
Right. Although too, now nobody can get them there. You're like, I
No.
hope it's a light landing.
Right. Good luck.
That one's
Yeah.
gonna hurt when it ends.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'll be here if you need me.
And then maybe
Yeah.
there's some people that have lives that are just quieter. Maybe I don't know what I believe, but maybe you have different iterations, and this one's just a smooth one, boring but smooth. I don't
Right.
want boring.
No.
I would
No.
rather feel it all. But yeah,
I heard someone say recently, and this somewhat applies, but they said, what'd they say? They said, I've got two boys and, they kick each other's asses all day long. They spill shit, they break shit. It drives me insane. And then somebody told this person, in those moments when you're about to blow your lid and you're about to do something that you wish you didn't, and that would potentially have an effect on your kids, act like you're 80 years old, coming back and visiting that moment.
oh, that's Peter.
Hmm.
Was that Peter Attia?
Yeah, he talks about that. He has the calendar on his
That's
in his
it. You're
office.
right. I saw that on Instagram.
Yeah, and it's funny because he's like, we talked about that. I was like, now you're all like a child rearing expert. He's like, it was just a fun idea. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Peter. He had someone came and told him. So he has in his office this like, it says the days until I think it's till he's 100 or something. So you just realize it's not that much time.
Yeah. Right.
It's not
How
that
many
much time.
days?
So,
Yeah.
and what he talks about with the kids, yeah, is going like, what would I do? Like
Yeah.
changing your mindset, which is, yeah, so true.
Oh, how about that? Now I remember it was him saying that.
Mhm.
That Peter. Um,
Good man.
I have
Yep.
I have one quick question because you said something about, the luxury of time to worry. And
Yeah.
then I know you've talked a lot about time to grieve, especially from parents and mothers. But I don't know, I was thinking about this conversation coming up and I was watching, I think, Succession last night. I don't know if you're watching. And there's this theme around scheduling time to grieve, right? It was also a really big theme in Shrinking, if you watch
Oh
that.
God, I love that.
Right. But in both of those cases, right, in one case, it's a really successful tool that they're using. And in another case, it's like, oh my God, you're so busy and so important in your own mind that you have to schedule your time to grieve. But I was thinking about you and I was curious your take on that. I mean, is that something that you think is, you talk to a lot of people who have been through grief and are going through grief. Is that something you think is healthy, is helpful, is a horrible sign that you're not processing in real time? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, that I've never been asked that. Let me think about that. I think in the beginning it is all consuming and it should be because you have died. So when somebody dies, that version of you dies that was in juxtaposition to them. So what people don't realize is grief is as much about losing that person as losing the person you were with that person in it. So you're saying goodbye to them, but you're saying goodbye to you. So that version of you dies the minute someone close to you that was integral in your life dies because you are now walking around in a reality you have never been in. And so there is, hmm?
That makes so much sense. Sorry.
Yeah. So, in the beginning, it's all consuming because you are trying to figure out how to even live in this world. So I mean, my experience is early grief is quiet and it's so dark and internal. You can't, it's hard to walk. It's hard to talk. It's hard to eat. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to sleep because, and I explain it most of the time. It's like you feel like you're being set on fire. Like that's how it feels when somebody dies that you love. It's like you're on fire. Um, as time goes by, and I talk to a lot of widows, and it's that same experience. Like it hurts. It's physical. Um, you kind of give in to grief then because you can't function. As time goes by, I have learned for me, even now it's very quick. I can cry and I can grieve and it'll be like 90 seconds. And then I can come right back to you guys. I think as time goes on, you can start to decide when you want to open that door. So I think of grief as like a room you go to and it's transformative, it's painful, it's scary. And in the beginning, the door's open and you are in it. Eventually you start to be able to modulate when you're going to deal with it. And that's when it starts to get beautiful because there gets to be this reverence around it. Like a lot of more, I mean, I meditate like a freak because that's what keeps me from being crazy. But I like look forward, like, oh, I'm gonna go cry and sit down with Nate and like be sad that I don't have a husband and my kids don't have a dad. But I get to turn it on. I get to modulate it. So I walk into the room when I want. In the beginning, there you are living in the room and people come visit you in there, but
Yeah.
you don't know how to live outside of that room, so you don't. But eventually your house starts to build rooms around it and there's joy and there's laughter and there's kids and then there's grief. And I mean, I don't ever want to stop grieving him because it reminds me to live. Like every time I think of him being dead, I'm like, well, let's go. It could be you tomorrow. And
Yeah.
it's fun. It's fun to live like that, to live knowing that like people do go. And like now's the time, today's the day.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a little bit of both, but early grief is all consuming. And then the kids, like they grieve so differently. I wish I'd known. Kids don't even know what the hell happened. And really all they want is their surviving person to be okay.
Mm.
They're just like, if
Mm.
you're okay, we're okay. And I think that's how kids feel about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so yeah.
that's really beautiful. Thank you.
That was
I really.
that. Yeah, that was a wonder. I love the house
Me too.
visual in the other rooms.
Mhm.
All right, Kelsey. I can't thank you enough. I mean, what an example of growth and light through suffering and pain. I mean, this is life. You hear it all the time. Death is a part of life. And it's when you can find light in the darkest of times, you're an inspiration to the countless others that are going to go through this. And we all are. Thank you for coming on and sharing your life with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. You guys are
Of
great.
course. All right, Kelsey, thank you so much. The information and opinions shared on this podcast are solely those of the host and guests and are not a substitute for medical advice. If you feel like you may need professional help, here are some resources. Visit Patrick Balsley's practice, sanacounseling.com, Robbie Shaw's practice, eventiderecovery.com, or visit theblanchardinstitute.com.